13 years together, 4 years married. And tonight I'm sitting in a cheap hotel room with one suitcase, realizing the life I thought I had is over. The room is quiet in that way. Hospitals are quiet at night. Not really silent, just full of a low hum. The air conditioner rattles. The ice machine down the hall coughs every few minutes. I'm lying on this stiff bed, staring at a yellowed ceiling, and the only clear thought in my head is, I don't want to wake up tomorrow. Not because I want to die, because I don't want to relive this. Not again. Not the replay of how my wife, the same woman who spent years telling everyone that all men cheat and how she could never forgive infidelity, became exactly what she claimed to hate. I moved out today. I packed the essentials. A few changes of clothes, toiletries, my work stuff, some documents. I left the house behind without a fight. Her parents paid a huge chunk of it, and somehow that feels symbolic. They can keep the building. I'm done carrying the weight of the life inside it. There was no big scene, no shouting in the driveway, no neighbors watching from their windows. I just walked out, closed the door, and drove to this hotel. And now that I'm alone, away from the smell of our home, away from her voice asking me to talk about us, the last month is finally catching up with me. Every moment, every message, every insult disguised as honesty, all of it is lining up in my head. This isn't where it started. This is where it ends. A week ago, I was still pretending there was something to save. We were in therapy, sitting on a couch across from each other, like two strangers with matching rings. The therapist's office was warm, soft lighting, tissues on the table, the usual setup for people trying to glue their lives back together. She cried a lot in those sessions. She talked about how badly she messed up, how she'd shattered my trust, how seeing the pain in my eyes made her hate herself. And it all sounded right. It sounded like remorse is supposed to sound. But while she was talking, I kept realizing the same thing over and over. I felt nothing. No urge to comfort her. No desire to reach out. Just this numb, heavy stillness inside me. The therapist turned to me and asked, "Do you want to save this marriage?" I remember looking at my wife. Her eyes were red, her hands twisting the tissue into shreds. She jumped in before I could answer. "We've been together 13 years. That has to mean something, right? Something about us works. I know I destroyed that, but I want to fight for us. I want to fix this, no matter how long it takes." When it was my turn, I told the truth. "I don't know," I said. "I honestly don't know if I want to save this. And I don't know if I can ever get over what happened." I could see the flash of pain in her face when I said that. But it was the only honest thing I had left. Those therapy sessions turned into an endless excavation of why. Why she did it. Why she crossed that line. Why she gave in. She repeated the same themes. I didn't feel desired. You stopped making me feel like a woman. I gave in to hormones because he was saying things that made me feel craved, alive, wanted. It was never just, I chose to betray you. I made that choice. Full stop. There was always context, always a story around it, always an angle where I could almost feel her gently pushing some of the responsibility toward me. Whenever I told her that I didn't know if I'd ever get past this, she'd say things like, "You know you hold grudges. Look at how you barely talk to your parents now. You never let things go." As if my broken relationship with my parents, two people who spent my entire childhood screaming at me that everything I did was wrong, was the same as what she did now. As if my inability to magically forgive abuse was the main problem. Not the fact that she chose to sext another man behind my back. She called it trying to move forward and not dwelling in the past. To me, it felt a lot like minimizing. Before therapy, there was just darkness. I'd go to work, move through the day on autopilot, come home and crash. I'd crawl into bed and sleep 12, 14 hours whenever I could, just to not be conscious. Awake meant thinking. Thinking meant replaying everything. So I chose sleep, or it chose me. Some days I was filled with this raw volcanic rage. I'd imagine myself storming out, taking the pets, slamming the door, cutting everyone off. Other days I felt like a hollowed-out shell, barely able to move. She'd knock on the door. "Can we talk? Can you just hold my hand? Can you please hug me? Can you tell me you still find me attractive at all?" Sometimes I'd give in. I'd let her hug me. I'd let her grab my hand. I'd mutter a compliment because watching her beg made me feel like a monster, even though I was the one who got betrayed. It felt like I was acting in a play about our marriage, reading lines I didn't believe in anymore, saying, "I love you," with a mouth that tasted like ash. And underneath that, there was this quiet, persistent thought I hated myself for having. Maybe this is what I deserve. Maybe I really am the problem. Maybe my parents were right about me being broken. My therapist later told me I was mourning the death of the life I thought I had, mourning a version of my marriage that never actually existed in the way I believed. At the time, it just felt like my brain was splitting in half. Outside of her and the therapist, I had almost no one. I confided in my closest friend. I dumped the whole story on them. Their reaction was blunt. "If I were you, I'd already be filing for divorce." No question. They've been supportive. They checked in. They listened. They never blamed me. And yet, I started feeling guilty for using them as a lifeline, like I was pushing them away with the weight of my constant pain. So I started holding back, even from them. The rest of my friends? They're fine when things are light. When we grab a drink, talk about work, complain about random stuff. But this is too heavy. They're not built for it. My family, immigrant culture, divorce is almost never okay. You stay married, you swallow everything, you prioritize the appearance of a stable home over the reality inside it. If I told them everything, I know what I'd hear. You don't throw away a marriage over messages. You work through it. You forgive. You're too sensitive. Life is hard. So I didn't tell them. Instead, I let that pressure sit in the back of my skull like a migraine, the expectation that a good son would endure anything to keep the marriage intact. And night after night, I went to bed hoping quietly that I wouldn't have to deal with any of it anymore, that I'd close my eyes and just not wake up. All of that, the numbness, the therapy, the isolation, came after the moment that really broke everything. The confrontation. The confrontation feels like it happened in another lifetime, but when I close my eyes, it's crystal clear. Every word, every breath. There wasn't any yelling, no plates thrown, no camera-ready explosion. Just two people sitting at a kitchen table while everything they'd built quietly collapsed. She knew before I said a word. She could feel it in how I'd gone silent the days before, how every glance had turned hollow. When I finally started speaking, I just laid it all out. The messages, the screenshots, the timelines, the betrayal. I told her how it ripped me apart inside to read her own words. The same woman who used to sneer that men are all pigs, now writing to another man about missing his touch. I didn't shout once. I didn't need to. The silence between sentences did all the work. She started explaining immediately. It wasn't physical, she said. It was just sexting. Like just could disinfect the whole thing. Then came the excuses. "You haven't made me feel desired in a long time. You never look at me like a woman anymore." I gave in to hormones. At first, I listened, trying to make sense of it. But every phrase sounded like someone trying to spin their crime into a misunderstanding. I reminded her how we'd already talked about the lack of intimacy 100 times. We blamed work, stress, exhaustion, maybe even hormones. But none of those things gave her permission to do this. When I told her how deeply disrespected I felt, she cried harder, begged me to believe that nothing physical happened, and for reasons even I don't fully understand. I did believe her. I think she's telling the truth about that part. It doesn't matter. Sexting is still betrayal, especially when it's about me. The worst part was the hypocrisy, the history of her accusing every man on earth of being unfaithful, the constant vigilance, the moral speeches, the insults she used to throw at her own friends' boyfriends. And now she was the one behind the screen, saying things no spouse should ever say to someone else. I mentioned that I might tell the other man's wife. That's when her mask slipped. She went from remorse to desperation in seconds. "Please don't ruin their family," she begged. "They just had a baby. Please don't destroy them. You should focus on fixing our marriage." Then she added, "If his wife finds out, she'll tell everyone at work. It'll ruin my life, both home and career. We still have 5 years left in residency together. Do you want me to lose everything?" I just sat there thinking how twisted that was. She ruined us, but I was somehow supposed to protect them. I wanted to see for myself what kind of man he was, this coworker she risked everything for. So I contacted him. He sounded panicked from the first second. "Please don't tell my wife. Nothing physical happened. You'll ruin my life. My son is my entire world," he said. I reminded him that if his son meant that much, maybe he shouldn't have been sexting my wife while complaining about that same kid to her in text messages. There was a long pause. Then he blocked me everywhere. A few hours later, my wife's phone buzzed. Messages from him. "Don't let your husband move out." Is he going to ruin my life now? Even at the bottom, he still thought about his own consequences first, and she was still defending him, telling me it was over between them, even as she clearly still cared what happened to him. After that talk, I told her I needed space. I moved into the guest room. I didn't leave right away, even though I fantasized about it. I kept hoping something, guilt, anger, divine intervention, would tell me what to do. She said she'd give me space, but she didn't mean it. She'd keep coming in, trying to start conversations, touching my arm like we hadn't just set fire to everything. She wanted to plan dinners, talk about counseling, pretend she could hug her way out of this. I remember one night in particular. She sat down next to me on the couch, gently reached for my hand like we were two kids trying to hold something fragile. She asked, "Can you just say we'll get through this?" And I couldn't. I didn't say anything at all. The air between us was heavy with all the words we stopped believing. After that night, she suggested therapy again. I agreed, because I didn't know what else to do. I wasn't ready to start a war, and I wasn't ready to move out either. I was just floating, half alive, half asleep. It's strange how quickly reality can collapse into a single image. A phone screen glowing in your dark bedroom. When it happened, it was almost by accident. She left her phone on the nightstand, buzzing with notifications. I looked at it because instinct, or dread, or maybe my subconscious already knew. Messages everywhere, not one or two, but hundreds. Some new, some old. It wasn't just flirting, it was connection. They were sharing their lives, their frustrations, their desires. And then came the explicit stuff, the kind of words that stick to your brain like tar. I scrolled through the worst lines, feeling that slow, cold sickness in my chest that starts in your stomach and spreads like poison. I couldn't stop reading. Each sentence was another nail in the coffin of someone I thought I knew. There were lines about me. Lines dissecting our intimacy, mocking how distant I'd been, laughing about how our relationship had dried up, as if turning my flaws into punchlines made their affair less disgusting. The irony? For years they'd been texting about work, harmless, professional. I'd even seen some of it before. Routine, normal. I trusted that. Then, months or maybe weeks before I found out, the tone changed. Compliments, late-night check-ins, then full-blown intimacy. And suddenly I understood why she'd been tired all the time, why she stopped touching me, why she'd go to bed facing the wall. I sat there with the phone in my hand for almost an hour before I confronted her. And even now I can still feel that moment, the thin line between ignorance and knowing, between safety and devastation. Our relationship had been off for almost a year before that. Everything felt dry, affection, sex, connection. We chalked it up to long hours, her residency, my own burnout. We promised to work on it when things calmed down. But things never did. We talked a lot about the symptoms, never the disease. The disease was disconnection, the kind that sneaks in slowly until one day you wake up next to a stranger. Back then, I never imagined she'd cross this line. I honestly believed emotional affairs happened to other people, to couples who were already falling apart. Not to us. We'd been together since we were practically kids. We built this life from nothing, moved cities, supported each other through exams, debt, family pressure. We shared the same hospital halls, had overlapping schedules, shared friends, families, stories. Our lives weren't just connected, they were tangled at every seam. And that's why this hurts in a way I can't describe. Because losing her doesn't just mean losing a person. It means unraveling everything else. The friends, the family ties, the habits, the comfort I thought was home. Every time I picture starting over, it feels like amputating half my body. But no matter how much that idea scares me, there's one thing I know for sure now. Staying would have killed me slower. We live in New York. Everyone keeps reminding me that divorces here are expensive, complicated, draining. But so is dying on the inside. The idea of telling the other man's wife kept looping in my head for weeks. Morally, I knew it was the right thing. His family deserves the truth. But at the time, I kept holding back. I kept thinking, I don't want to ruin her life. As if her life wasn't already a lie. As if silence was kindness. I'm not out for revenge. I don't want to get even. I just want things to stop hurting. And still, every time I pictured that woman, his wife sitting at home with a baby, thinking she has a faithful husband, I felt sick, because I knew I was the only one who could pull the curtain back, and I kept hesitating. That's the part that eats me alive. The passivity, the waiting, the hope that maybe she'll feel worse if I stay, that maybe time itself will hand me closure. But it doesn't. It just leaves you emptier. And now here I am, in this hotel room, writing mental letters I'll never send. Knowing the next ones I write, my wife's goodbye, his wife's truth, will finally set the whole thing on fire. Sitting here in this dim hotel light, I keep seeing flashes of the last month like a loop I can't stop watching. Tiny moments that don't make sense alone, but add up to something final. There was the morning I woke up before her. She was asleep on her side, phone clutched under the pillow. I remember the sudden wave of resentment that hit me out of nowhere. She looked peaceful, almost innocent. But all I could think was, you burned everything down and still get to rest. There was the night she came home from work, talking about how awkward things had gotten with him. She swore they'd stopped speaking. He blocked me, she said, as if that proved anything. Then, a week later, I saw the message pop up again. Another text from him. Just about work, she said. Sure, just work. The same work that turned into sexting, the same job she begged me not to ruin by telling the truth. When I called her on it, she cried again. It meant nothing, she said. I'm blocking him for good this time. I wanted to believe it, but belief isn't something you can just restart like a dead engine. She was trying, in her own way. Cooking more, hugging me more, saying she loved me more. I know what that looks like. Guilt in motion, remorse trying to fix itself. Maybe it was genuine, maybe it was just survival. Either way, it didn't touch the numbness. The trust was gone. I told her as much one night. I'll always have a piece of distrust in my head now, even if you never do anything again. It's just there. She nodded, teary-eyed, told me she understood. But the truth is, she didn't. She wanted forgiveness to work like a switch. She thought if she could cry the right way, touch me the right way, I'd flip it back to love. What she never understood is that love and trust share the same heart. You can't lose one and keep the other alive. The loneliness grew heavier each day. Depression isn't loud, it's quiet. It seeps into everything until the simplest act, brushing your teeth, answering a message, opening a bottle of water, feels like climbing a hill. I'd go to work and pretend to function. Come home, eat something flavorless, fall asleep for hours. Wake up with no energy but too much thought. Each night I'd think the same thing. I don't even recognize my life anymore. I started therapy after the first confrontation. My therapist told me what I was feeling was grief, that I wasn't crazy, that I was mourning the death of the marriage I thought I had. But hearing that didn't make it easier. How do you grieve someone who's still sitting in the next room, making dinner and acting like you can just rebuild? I told the therapist I felt paralyzed, like whatever courage I had dissolved after the shock wore off. I couldn't move forward, couldn't step back, couldn't even define what I wanted. She said, "Sometimes the body survives by shutting down when the damage is too big." And that sentence stuck with me, because that's exactly what happened. I didn't fight. I didn't scream. I just shut down. For weeks, I didn't tell anyone else. Then one evening, I called my closest friend and spilled everything. He listened quietly and then said, "If I were you, I'd file for divorce tomorrow." I laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "It's not that simple," I said. He told me it is that simple, but he couldn't see the knots from where he was. The shared friends, the overlapping families, the layers of our life that made walking away feel like open-heart surgery. That night I lay in bed thinking about all the people who'd take sides, all the whispers that would follow. They were so perfect together. He should have forgiven her. It was only emotional. The word only haunted me. It had been weaponized from the start. Only sexting, only emotions, only a moment of weakness. But only doesn't mean harmless. It means I'm minimizing what destroyed you. I think the slowest poison was hope. Hope that if I waited long enough, something would shift inside me. That love would catch its second wind, that therapy would spark some miracle. But the opposite happened. The longer I stayed, the colder I became. Until one morning I looked at her across the breakfast table, messy hair, puffy eyes, nervous smile, and realized I didn't feel anything anymore. Not love, not anger, not pity, just the quiet certainty that I didn't belong there. So I made a decision. I started packing small things at first. Clothes I claimed I no longer wore, books I said I'd lend to a friend. I waited until she was on shift, then collected the rest. Laptop, documents, chargers, toothbrush. Enough for a new life and not much more. I booked the hotel that afternoon. When she got home that evening, I told her I needed time to think, more than a night or two. She asked if it was about divorce. I said yes. She started crying again, saying she'd change, that she'd do anything. And I just kept repeating, "I'm done." I drove off, watching the house shrink in the mirror. No music. Now it's just me, the hum of the AC, and the weight of clarity. She cheated. She lied. She minimized it. She tried to shift the blame. I wasn't perfect. Far from it. I'm distant, tired, sometimes closed off. But none of those flaws gave her permission to betray me. For a long time I told myself I didn't want revenge, that telling his wife would be revenge, that walking away would be cruel. But sitting here, I see it differently now. Telling the truth isn't vengeance. It's setting the record straight. It's refusing to protect people who used my decency as a shield. His wife deserves to know what her husband did. I deserve a life that doesn't smell like betrayal every time she walks past me. It's really that simple. Tomorrow I'll contact her. I'll tell her what happened. I'll tell my wife that our marriage is over. No more therapy. No more late-night guilt sessions. No more pretending that a dead thing can still grow. I don't know what comes next. Papers, lawyers, the slow process of cutting a joint life in half. But at least it will be real. Not this half-life I've been living. I look around the room. One suitcase, one bed, one man starting over at 33. It should feel like loss. Instead, it feels like breathing for the first time in months. And maybe that's enough for now.